All right, shalom everybody. This is Rabbi Rosenfarb from Beth Messiah Synagogue in Norfolk, and this is our Torah study today. Hey, look, my watch says Beth Messiah is on live. There you go. All right, so let's take a look at Genesis 49, verse 28, where Jacob is finishing up his life, really. And Lord, thank you for your word, and enrich us by it, Lord, in Yeshua's name. So Jacob has given Joseph Shechem, which is really strange unless you know the story. Tacitly, this is like an admission. You remember he sent Joseph to Shechem to see about his brothers, and Shechem is that city of death, right? So in a sense, maybe Jacob sent Joseph there. If Joseph reconciled with his brothers, great. If they killed him, there would still be peace in the family. Now, I'm reading between the lines. The text doesn't say it, but it's too uncanny that Jacob would deed to Joseph the city of Shechem. So that's what he does. And then he, basically on his deathbed, he is going to tell the brothers in verse 1 of chapter 49, I want to tell you what shall befall you in the end of days. And some of the remarks are prophetic. Some are settling scores. It's a compendium of things. But in the end, regardless of the prophecy, you note in verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, Joseph as a tribe will be destroyed. There's no tribe of Joseph. And his sons, they're the half-tribes that will inherit. But the scripture says, nevertheless, regardless of even what Simeon did, regardless of what Reuben did, all of these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spoke to them and blessed them, every one according to how he blessed them. The bulk of attention now in these last couple of chapters are going to be Judah and Joseph. And it's easily seen. 17 statements about Judah, 19 statements about Joseph, and for the other sons, we've got 38 verses, which isn't that much, and he centers in Reuben, the firstborn. My might and the firstborn, first fruits of my manhood, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. He's described as unstable as water, so he's not gonna move forward. Simeon and Levi have already been addressed, but he said, "Cursed was their anger; it was fierce, and their wrath was cruel." Jacob says, "You hurt my reputation among the pagans," and Simeon is going to go into obscurity in the future. He'll be assimilated into the other tribes, and Levi will become actually the most important tribe, the priestly tribe. And then Judah is addressed here. We're going to turn to that in verse 8 to 12. Judah shall be your brother's praise. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you are gone up. He stooped down, he crouched like a lion and as a lioness. Who shall arouse them up? And this is a very important one, verse 10. The scepter, that is the ruling scepter, shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff. In other words, the adjudication of Israel and the rule of Israel shall not pass from between your feet until Shiloh comes. Shiloh means to he to whom it belongs. And then unto him, that is Shiloh, Judah through Shiloh, that one to whom everything belongs, shall the obedience of the peoples be. So peoples here is way beyond Israel. It's the nations as well. This is the messianic person. Binding his she-ass to the vine, and the son of his she-ass unto the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine, his vestures in the blood of grapes. This is all warfare, of course. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. Prosperity. Notice the contrast, right, to Joseph. to the prophecy of Joseph, and that's in verses 22 to 26. Joseph is a fruitful vine by a fountain, whose branches run over a wall. The archers have dealt bitterly with him, and shot at him and hated him. That's the brothers, right? But his bow abode firm, and the arms of his hands were made supple. By the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from the shepherd, the stone of Israel, even by the God of your father, who shall help you, and by the Almighty, who shall bless you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that couches beneath, blessings of the breasts and the womb, blessings of your father, and mighty beyond the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound the everlasting hills. They shall be upon the head of Joseph, on the crown of the head of the prince, the Nazir, among his presence. So take a look. Joseph is not a ruler, right? Joseph is a fruitful vine. Okay. Joseph is a fruitful vine, not a lion's whelp. Judah is the guy who has proven himself to be the diplomat, to be the one that contrary to before the Dinah thing and the Tamar thing, afterwards he realizes how important it is to take care of the family, keep the family together, and take care of the family. He is the spokesperson to Joseph and basically to Pharaoh as well on behalf of his brothers. Joseph is the Egyptian. He's the Egyptian dream, right? The sheaves bowed to his sheaf, not to him being the lion. So the lion is Judah, and basically we see what's happened here. Jacob confesses his error to his sons. He says, my favorite is not going to rule. And tacitly, what does this mean? It means that he's been wrong, like his fathers have been wrong in choosing by favoritism, right? So tacitly, he alludes to something else coming down the pike that does not regard favoritism, and that's Torah. Okay? There needs to be law that designates, right? That designates how things are to be and doesn't show favoritism. Law says whoever steals, steals, and they're to be treated in the same way. Law says that the judge cannot regard the status of the person, but that even though the person might be favored, law says this is this and that is that. Now, this is important, shalom, because the patriarchate, notice, deals in favoritism. The head of the clan chooses. Law does not choose by favoritism. Law chooses what? This is this and that is that. The law of the Spirit in the New Covenant says this, that all of us are chosen, that we're all favored. It's not that one is not favored over the other. That's not the idea, okay? It's not the negative in the New Covenant. It's the positive. We're all favored. We're all priests and kings, right? So everybody gets the same inheritance. I just think it's an interesting progression from no law, favoritism, to, which is problems, to law, which has limited success, but some success over favoritism, and then the law of the Spirit, where every one who's guided by the law of the Spirit is the favorite, right? So I don't have more than you, you don't have more than me. It's not that God favors you more than me, he favors both of us, all of us, right, equally. And then verses 29 and 32, and he charged them, he said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers. Where in the land? In the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan. He's pretty specific, right? There's no room for error. Did he mean allegorically? Can Goshen be Canaan? No, it can't, because Goshen doesn't have the cave. Goshen doesn't have the field of Mamre, right? Goshen doesn't have the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, which Abraham bought. Goshen doesn't have any of that. With the field of Ephron the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. There I buried Leah. Wow! What a confession. I preferred Rachel, but Rachel died by the way. I preferred Joseph, but now my wife is Leah. She's the true wife. She's the one I buried, right? There, along with the other wives. This is huge for Jacob. Okay, Jacob is finally Israel. He's finally got something to pass on, right? And you can see it when he actually spoke with Pharaoh. Remember, he comes in like he owns the place, right? And Jackie Mason has this wonderful routine. The difference between Jews and Gentiles coming into a restaurant. A Gentile comes into a restaurant to eat. This is just a joke. This is not meant to offend anybody. Gentile comes into a restaurant, eats quickly, is finished. A Jew comes into the restaurant like a partner. I want this seat. I don't want that seat. I want to sit over there. I want my back against the wall. I don't want to face the wall. I want this, that. I want the butter on top. I don't want it on the bottom. Anyway, he goes through this whole thing. All I'm saying, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But anyway, Jacob has become Israel. Jacob has become someone that understands God's choice over man's choice. He understands Leah is the true wife. Leah ended up raising all of the children, even Rachel's children. Okay? She is the tender-eyed one. She is the one that sees the covenant. She is the one that can live without the love of her husband, right? Because she has her children and she's getting what she needs from God. Right? Blessed be the Lord. So she's a very special person. And there I buried Leah. The purchase of the field and the cave that is therein was from the sons of Heth. He keeps reiterating over and over and over, specifically, don't get the wrong idea. There is nowhere else. You've got to take me back. Now, what's Jacob's hope? Jacob's hope also in taking him back, one, that they, like he, will remember the promise to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. The promise of the land, that Egypt is not their home. Maybe, just maybe, Joseph, in taking me back, will also remember the land of his youth. It's a possibility, right? So with precision, he describes geographically exactly where the everything is. He describes where his family is. Bury me with our family. Bury me with my family. It's a personal trust that I'm giving you, right? I want you to remember the family relationship to the land. I want you to memorialize the purchase. Why did I purchase land in some obscure place? Because it's our first step towards possessing the land that the Lord, our God, gave to us long ago. This is the promised land, right? Even though you're going to be in Egypt for over 400 years, Canaan is still the promised land. Okay, don't forget it. You're going to sojourn in Egypt for a very long time, but don't forget. Don't forget. So he makes an end. He gathers up his feet into bed, and he expires. He's ready for death. And Joseph fell upon the face of his father and wept upon him, and he kissed him, and he commanded him to be embalmed like an Egyptian. Right? So Joseph is very emotional here. There's been some bonding, obviously, that's taken place, and he's very emotional about losing him. But he commands the physicians to embalm Joseph. And so 40 days they're mourning. They wept. The Egyptians wept as well because they were commanded to, probably. So the text, by the way, does not say something very, very important. Let me read to you from chapter 5, 25, Genesis, verses 7 through 10. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he had lived, 100 years and 70 years and 5 years. And Abraham expired and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased of the children of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. Do you see how Abraham's described? An old man full of days, right? His life was rich. Look at how the next one's, chapter 35, verse 28 and 29. And the days of Isaac were 100 years and 80 years. And Isaac expired and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of days. And Esau and Jacob, his sons, buried him. You see how they're described? Old men full of days, rich. They had a rich life. None of this is said of Jacob. Okay? It's a foreshadowing, isn't it, of Egypt and of Jacob's very difficult life. Jacob lived a difficult life. Remember what he said to Pharaoh? You know, he gave him his age, 140 years or whatever it was, and it's been just grief. I've had nothing but grief. It's not been pleasant, right? All that's said of Jacob is, and Jacob died, right? Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained into the days of the years of the life of my fathers in their days of their sojourning. Chapter 47, verse 19. So we go on to chapter 50. I'm skipping so we can emphasize some features here. And the days of weeping, this is chapter 50, verses 4 through 6. The days of weeping for him were past. Joseph spoke unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If please I have found grace in your eyes, speak please in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Behold, I die in my grave, which I have digged for me, in the land of Canaan. There you will bury me. Now therefore let me go up, please, and bury my father, and I will come back. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. Now, this is interesting because Joseph has changed the words. And we've seen this before, right? People changing the words because the original words could elicit the wrong response. Look at what has said, right? He omits Jacob's insistence that bury me not in Egypt. Okay? Meaning that he doesn't want anybody to be buried in Egypt. So Joseph omits that, right? And he omits the cave that Abraham bought. Because to Pharaoh, that's a what? That's a sign of permanency. Right? And he also petitions Pharaoh, Jacob has digged this for himself. Jacob never used this, right? Joseph promises. Did you understand what I just said? Jacob digged it for himself, not for his family. That's not what Jacob said. Jacob said that the cave is where my father was, my grandfather, their wives, my wife. Okay? Joseph very carefully omits all of this. And then he says, don't worry, I'm going to come back. He says, Jacob said, it's the cave that he digged for himself. Joseph lies. Okay, he twists the truth, however you want to see it. He doesn't want Pharaoh to get the wrong idea. He wants Pharaoh to allow him to go into Canaan. Let me go up. And so, by the way, the next Israelite that stands up to Pharaoh is not going to say, let me go up. He's going to say, Shalach et ami, let my people go. Release them. He's going to command Pharaoh to release the people. It's a contrast in Exodus. And Joseph verses 7 to 14, went up to bury his father. Now, I think I asked you last week to take a look at the journey. Did I ask that? Yeah, to look at the geography. And just let's take a look at it, all right? And if you've got a map at the end of your Bible, you can turn to that and take a look at the journey. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, all the elders of the land of Egypt, also all the house of Joseph and his brothers and his father's house. Only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. Okay? Joseph was very, very careful to leave their valuables in Egypt. Okay? Leave the young ones, so the brothers are going to come back with him, right? Jacob's got hopes for other things. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company, right? A little army accompanied them. And they came upon the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, and there they wailed with a great and sore wailing, and he made a mourning for his father for 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning of at the floor of Atad, they said, "This is grievous mourning unto the Egyptians." Wherefore the name of it, Avel Mitzrayim, the mourning of Egypt, is beyond the Jordan. And his sons did unto him according to as he commanded him. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field, for possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite, in front of Mamre. The text continuously reminds us that this was Israelite territory. Okay, it's the first step, in a sense, to possessing the land. And Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father. After he buried his father. Now, it's a strange route. The direct way, right, to Hebron would be straight northeast. From Egypt, it should be a straight northeast, right, going up the Mediterranean coast, crossing the Negev desert, passing through Beersheba, but we're told twice in the text that the procession entered Canaan from beyond Jordan. That means from the east of the river. Well, there's only one way to enter Canaan from the east of the river, and that's to go south all the way around Canaan and coming up the long way and coming up on the east of the river, right? To what we call the Transjordan or Jordan, right? So what does it, now it's interesting that this journey is very similar to the Exodus journey, isn't it? Okay? But what is Joseph's purpose in taking the long route, right? We can say maybe he wanted to stay with his father's sarcophagus more. What's the point? The point is that when you go through the spots, the direct path, the spots that the brothers grew up in, what happens? Nostalgia. Oh, that's where we herded our flocks. Oh, remember when we did that? Remember when our father accompanied? This is where our father and our mother, okay? Joseph is avoiding at all costs any possibility of nostalgia. He doesn't want any attachment to the land. So he takes the long route purposefully. Okay? So that there's no sights. You know how it is when you've lived in an area. Every once in a while, we've lived in a number of houses, and every once in a while, I go back to see how the whole old house looks. Okay? Or if I'm in a city where I lived, and I go to where I used to live, and how has it changed? And there's some nostalgia. There's memories there. Okay? Nope, not going to happen here. He goes all the way south, and all the way up to the east of Jordan, and then crosses over. Okay? And it's all purposeful. Now, the father is gone. There's nobody to protect him. What do you think the brothers are worried about? retribution, right? Now Joseph is in command. We don't have our father there, right? I wonder what's going to happen. So they charged Joseph saying, right? Let's see. It may be that Joseph will hate us and will fully requite. This is in chapter 50, verses 15 through 18. They're talking amongst themselves. Fully requite us all the evil we did unto him. And they charged Joseph, saying, your father did charge before he died, saying, you shall say unto Joseph this way, now forgive. Nasa, lift up. Take away. Take away, please, the transgression of your brothers and their sin for what they did, for the evil that they did unto you. So now, please, Nasa, lift up the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. It's the first time they've referred to themselves as that. Avdaim, the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke unto him, and his brothers went and fell down before him. They said, behold, we are your slaves. The old guilt is there, and they're trying to get Joseph to guarantee that they're going to be okay. We're your brothers. We are servants of the most of the God of your father, not of your God, but the God of our father. Joseph. Now, did Jacob say this to them? We have no record of it. We don't know if they made it up or not. Okay, but clearly they're worried about it. And Joseph said to them, and his response is really remarkable. It shows that there's a change in Joseph. I told you before, right? Joseph the arrogant is changing before their eyes. And Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? He did say earlier on, and did receive the appellation of a God as second to Pharaoh, right? Right? If Pharaoh's like a God, then Joseph's like a God earlier on in the text as well. Am I in the place of God? And you, although you meant evil against me, God meant it for good. Not the gods here. There's no there's no article here. He's referring to the God of his fathers right now. God meant it for good, to bring to pass this day, to save much people alive. For now, do not fear, I will sustain you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke to their hearts. Now, clearly, though, Joseph is going to be the one that will sustain them in their achuzah, their inheritance that he gave them. He would prefer they forget all about Goshen. They're not necessarily going to be able to do that, but they did stay there for a long time. Okay, they got used to it, right? So God is the only one capable of judging and forgiving sins. He insists, though, but like a God, I'm going to sustain you. So Joseph himself wrestles with his identity. Am I in the stead of the God? But, like a God, I am going to sustain you. Like Pharaoh's a God and sustains his people. And he does not rebuke them for calling them his slaves, which is, they were free. They were the only ones free in the entire land. The Egyptians had sold themselves into slavery to Pharaoh. They were the only one, but they said, we are your slaves. Okay, we are your servants. Right? So Joseph ignores the brothers' appeal to the dead father, buried in a foreign land. Joseph does not figure anymore into, Jacob doesn't figure into Joseph's thought. He just wants his brothers to stay. So here in chapter 50, verses 22 to 26, and Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and the house of his father, and Joseph lived 110 years, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brethren, I die, but God will surely remember you, and get this, and bring you up out to the land he swore. We never saw this before. There's something that's changed in Joseph. Maybe his dialogue with his brothers, maybe his own mortality, realizing that the Egyptian afterlife is a sham, right? For whatever's working in Joseph, unto the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely remember you, and you shall carry my bones from here. Wow, that's a change, right? A real change. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, right? They embalmed him and put him into a sarcophagus, an aron, right? Joseph and his father's house dwell in Egypt, but notice Joseph and his brethren dwell separately. The Israelites are in Goshen. He is in the palace, probably in here in Memphis, right? And he attains a wonderful, now 110 years for the Egyptians is a long life. Okay? It's one of the reasons Pharaoh saw Jacob. How old are you? 140 years? Egyptians don't live that old. How are you living that old? Well, you know, they were rough and tumble guys. They were people of the land, you know? And it's a whole different things. Years later, of course, Moses took the bones of Joseph up. We'll read that as next week we start Exodus. Very interesting beginning there as well. There in Exodus 13. And Joshua, the bones of Joseph, they go into the land. And where do they bury him? Of all places. Where do they bury Joseph, you recall? In Shechem. Of all places. Shechem is turned from a murderous site to a burial site, but the burial site of honor. Okay? The story has turned. It takes Joseph being buried, which Jacob didn't know if he was going to be buried in Shechem anyway. All right? It takes Joseph being buried with honors among the Israelites in Shechem to turn the whole story around. Joseph's story does not end when he dies. Joseph's story ends when he's buried in Shechem in the Promised Land, right? Which is an incredible story, right? So, then came Judah to his brothers. Let's see, am I going backwards here? Yeah, I am. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there. Right. Okay. Well, I could go. I'm not going to go to. Yeah. Well, I don't want to go into Exodus yet. I'm going to stop here a little early today. And is there a question about the story? Give us a little time. Yeah. I'm sorry? No, the 120 has to do with the flood. I know that's misunderstood, that God now has shortened the lifetime, but that 120 years does not refer to the age of human beings. Because clearly Jacob lived longer. Moses lived longer. The 120 years has to do with when the flood would come. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, is everybody awake? Yes, sir. I got to think about that. You know what? It's out of my mind. Do you recall?
Normally linked to some historical Jewish tragedy.
I can't recall. Is it Judith? Is it the story of, or Hannah? The story of Hannah and her 7 sons, maybe, for the Hanukkah season. Is that what it is?
The morning of the siege of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylonia.
Totally wrong.
Culminated in the destruction of Solomon's temple.
Okay. Well, sometimes you guess. All right. Any other questions that I can't answer? Yes, sir.
I wonder if there could be a connection if Joseph was a type of Messiah. People often compare a type of king to much like the actual. And then Joseph being married to Shechem, which later on in the divided kingdom became the not real temple. If it's some parallels or something.
I hadn't really thought about that, actually. It's an interesting thought. Obviously, you've given some thought to that. Did you want to elaborate a little bit? Or?
I thought about it about a minute ago.
A minute ago. Yeah, let's see. Shechem is this site. It's always an important city, but it's the site of in a sense, genocide, right? It's also the potential site of Joseph's death. It becomes a place of honor when Joseph returns, and then becomes a place of dishonor when Rehoboam and Jeroboam have their respective kingdoms. Maybe I have to give that some thought. I think you're right, though. I think it's correct to say do not make too much of the similarities between Yeshua and Joseph. You can make a big deal about the sufferings of Joseph leading to the redemption of Israel and Egypt. I think you can do that generically. The Messiah, son of Joseph, in that regard, is someone who endures the suffering for the redemption, for the atonement, really. But outside of that, it's not really the scriptures don't make a big deal of that. It's more rabbinic than biblical. We don't see Messiah. Huh? Yeah. I usually don't make a big deal of it, except to point out that the Jewish sages used to think about the suffering of the Messiah and the glory of the Messiah and trying to reconcile those two things. But I'm not sure that the Bible's interested in that. It just doesn't seem to be. I can't quote you a portion where Yeshua talked about that or talked about Joseph or Joseph is a hero in the Bible from the perspective that God utilized him to save many people. And Joseph was correct in that. But there's no parallel of character whatsoever. Joseph doesn't look anything like Yeshua. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Rabbi, I like the verse that says 19, which I've never seen before, but when Joseph said, "Am I in the place of God?" Because for my own self, struggling with judgment or struggling with other people's judgment, trying to have compassion, I love that statement.
Yeah.
I could use that. Am I in the place of God?
Yeah.
To remind myself, help me with that judgment, or someone asks me, "Well, what do you think of?" And now walk into the gossip, etc.
Yeah.
I love that. I never have read that ever.
Great, yeah. Yeah. Now Joseph is a little schizophrenic too. He, on the one hand, he genuinely is not going to judge his brothers. Genuinely going to take care of them. Love has ensued, and he has attained a love for his father, a renewed love for his father. But then on the other hand, I will sustain you is very godlike, so very Egyptianish, right? Second to Pharaoh is like the second god in charge of sustaining the people. But I would say that's a good lesson for us, huh? Judgment. I am the Lord. Judgment is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So next week, read Exodus, first couple of chapters, and notice the similarity of what Moses was put in and what Noah and his family were in. It's the same word. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Egypt seems to be the haven because, Egypt's beginnings were the Nile. And the Nile and its rich soil, they could grow anything. And they did. And they were very prosperous. So whereas there's not so much like the Sinai Desert, Egypt offers a very plausible place to go, not only for refuge, but also for trade, right? Israel's key advantage, let's say economically, is not what it has. Its key advantage is that it is a road that connects Europe, the Far East, and Africa. And those were the trade routes, and that's by and large how they prospered. You know, when gold was found in Nubia, the pharaoh went crazy and became extremely rich, and so there was commerce that increased at that time. Everybody wanted to go to Egypt to get part of the loot, you know. So the Far East had all these exotic things that they could sell to Egypt, and Egypt had lots and lots of money to pay for things. And the Israelites prospered, the Mesopotamian people prospered, the Far East prospered, all because of the Nubians.
All that also came up the highway, the Nile.
What's that?
All that all came up the highway of the Nile and passed through the port of what later became Alexandria. And all that taxes and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. The road by the Mediterranean Sea is called the Via Mara, you know, the way of the sea passage, you know, and that road was easily defended by a few people in many places. That's the only reason Israel could keep that road open for themselves, is the road was narrow. What did you? Yeah.
I was going to say that also the stations that have become prosperous for how that boat had access to water.
Yeah. Ice-free port, you know. During the Cold War, that was one of the few ice-free ports that the United States had access to. All right. So, God, thank you for this book of Genesis. And we just anticipate an exciting time in Exodus where we see the emergence of the baby through the water canal, a slow gestation period, a painful gestation period, and yet an inevitable conclusion that the baby would be born on the other side. Lord God, we're anticipating this incredible story and incredible lessons that you have for us as well. We thank you in Yeshua's name. We'll see you at 10:30.